I really pay attention to my sensory needs when I'm creating and have a bit of a ritual. So a specific time of day, like I have my Diet Coke. That's like my treat. I light a candle. I have a playlist for each project that I'm working on. I usually put on like my comfies, including slippers. So I definitely pay attention to what's happening in my sensory environment because that makes it easier for me to focus and to want to be in the writing space. Because again, now that I'm writing like for a deadline for contract, you are getting into that space where it's like the Pinterest picture or like I have to do it. And that does sometimes make it harder to tap into that joy and that playfulness.
Creative flow sort of thing. Yes.
Mhm.
You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. My guest today on the Brave OT podcast is Jaima Fixsen. On her website, she describes herself with bold words at the top that say moody, wordy, bookish, nerdy. And I couldn't relate more. I love it. Jaima's an OT in Edmonton and a best-selling author. She writes in the category of STEMinist fiction, writes novels, and is even a USA Today best-selling author. To give you a sense of where we go today in this conversation, I want to orient to the relatable sense of coming to a place in your own life where you're craving different occupations, feeling a sense of uncertainty or dissatisfaction, a desire for a different type of fulfillment. And sometimes this happens in the middle of our lives. Sometimes this happens after a big crisis, during a pandemic, maybe, or when the demands of our lives are shifting a little bit. With this in mind, we explore how Jaima came to writing as a paid occupation and using her OT skills to really support herself in this unstructured time as a creative and divergent thinker. I want to give a shout out to Jane, a clinic management software that's here to make our practice life a little easier in the area of writing. For many practitioners, documentation can feel a bit clunky and disrupt the flow of an appointment. That's where Jane's templates can help. With dozens of customization options, you can tailor your templates to your workflow so you can focus your energy on what matters, helping your clients. Access the template library built by practitioners across different disciplines, then edit those templates to fit your unique needs without starting from scratch. Or create your own templates for every step of patient care, including intake form questions, clinical surveys, and treatment plans. This way, you have everything you need to start your appointments prepared. To learn more about how Jane can help make your documentation work for you, head to meet.jane.app/documentation to book a demo. Oh, and one last thing. If you're ready to get started with Jane, you can use my code VITALITY for a 1-month grace period on your new account.
Hi, Carlin.
Hey, Jaima. It is so good to see you. I'm really excited that you're here. And I'm really excited that you came up and just chatted at the CAOT conference. That's where we met a few weeks ago. I had a booth for the Brave OT podcast, and you came up and we just had a really enjoyable conversation, you and Lindsay and I, about writing, about doing things that matter, about OT, and you came back with a copy of your book for each of us, which I was so grateful for, and I'm really enjoying reading. It's called The Specimen, and I just got to the part where they have discovered the specimen and have been corresponding about it a little bit, so as not to spoil it for anybody.
Well, that was one of my favorite scenes to write.
Was it?
But just to take a minute, I was so happy to see you at the CAOT conference because, Carlin, the podcast is like my OT lunchroom. I work in community peds, so there's lots of other professionals on the team, but there's never two OTs on a team, so I just don't get a lot of that peer-to-peer OT interaction. So the podcast is my lunchroom. It's when I get to hang out or listen to other OTs. So it means a lot to me. And it was just so fun to see you in real life.
I love that you call it a lunchroom. My desire was to create connection and community and on a deeper level than we can through LinkedIn or Facebook or something like that. And so to hear you call it like a lunchroom, because having lunch together is such an intimate experience, right? Of
It really is.
conversing and talking about
Mhm.
life and work and all of the things, food.
It's absolutely that for me. So it's a lovely space. Thanks for creating it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you came up. It was a very last minute decision for me to get a booth at the CAOT
Mm,
conference. I went to register and I thought, oh, there's exhibitors. Oh, I could do that. I'm probably too late. And it was more than if I just registered for the conference, but not
mm.
unmanageably so. And so I thought that could be interesting. What would I do about it? What would I make the booth about? Would it be my whole business? And then people don't know there's too many different things going on. Would it be about my OT practice? Would it be about my group coaching program? And I decided to make it about the podcast because that would be really approachable.
Mm.
There's nothing to sell. People could just come and talk about interesting things like the topics of the podcast. Maybe people already listen, maybe people haven't heard about it. And that could create engagement because that was ultimately my goal. And look at this, it worked. Here you are.
It really did. And it was like, oh my goodness. Well, I mean, was that weird? Because I do think when you host something like a podcast, like I kind of feel like I know you, but
Right.
like, I'm a total random.
I'm curious, do you get that when people who have read your books meet you? How does that feel on the flip side where you're the person who people might be thinking is a big deal because you write and publish books and then they come to you as a fan?
Maybe a little. I think there is some warmth when
Yeah.
people come to me if they've read my stuff before and liked it. I mean, usually they don't come if they're like, I hate that about you.
That was terrible.
But I do think it's different because you have that kind of safety of writing fiction. I think if I was writing memoir or something, it's not that fiction writing isn't intimate, but you have this glass of this is an imaginary place that I'm inviting you into.
Yeah. I was gonna say less vulnerability, but I wouldn't say it's actually less vulnerability because putting a creation out into the world is very vulnerable, but it's less personally vulnerable or
Yeah, but
yeah.
there's always that sense of like hypothesizing how
Mhm.
much of the author is present in the work and if, how much is their imagined experience and how much is their actual experience. So I think as readers, sometimes you wonder and interpolate it, but you don't know. Whereas your podcast, there is that high level of intimacy. And, like when I relate it to a lunchroom, like I feel like I've sat down and had lunch with you and you've never seen me before.
True. This is true, very interesting. It's connection, and it is a weird thing to be on this end of that because I learned how many people have been listening or how it was assigned to them in a university class or something like
Oh,
that, and
really? That's
yeah,
so
and
cool.
I heard that a number of times from a number of they weren't all in the same class, they were from different universities and different programs even, and, oh, I had no idea, like, you don't know who's listening on the other end or how they're experiencing it unless they reach out, and so it was very
Hmm.
rewarding to me to hear of various impacts, and then I can then assume that it's reaching in a bigger way than I thought, than just my stats and numbers could tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Because those are so lifeless in a way, right? They don't have that necessarily that same emotional impact of someone being like, wow, I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true,
And it's
and
kind of the same when you put a book out into the world. Like every so often, I try not to, but like at least twice a year, I get the royalty stats. So I know what's selling. And
yeah.
I guess anytime I wanted, I could check reviews, but I try not to do that and just have that in person
Mhm.
experience.
How do you have in-person experiences for your book?
Conferences, or I do a weekly newsletter and people reply to that. Book clubs and like other reader events. Those are
Great.
really fun and rewarding.
How do you know to do those things?
Sometimes I get invited, and sometimes they'll be like, "Hey, we'll be at this event if you want to come." And yeah,
That's great.
I have a publicist who will match me up sometimes with different book groups, or if people request to see me, then sometimes it goes through that. But
That makes sense. Yeah, because you wouldn't know these things.
no,
Um, you and your computer sitting down to write something, and
yeah.
here's what we do with that. You had some guidance. Before we get to that end, I would love to take a few steps back and explore how you came to writing, but start with tell me about your various roles and occupations right now.
So right now I work about half time as an OT, and I write about half time as well. I've got 3 kids. They're pretty big, so it's not like I'm like doing the kindergarten pickup or anymore. Like that phase of my life is behind me. It was fun. It was fun while it lasted for sure, but on to new things. Yeah. So I had worked as an OT mostly in adult vocational rehab, and with our third child, and then some needs with our kids. I had a daughter with a severe stutter, and our middle child was diagnosed with ODD, and daycare for 3 kids. I was going to step away from OT for a while.
Yeah.
And I was pretty nervous about it. And I knew I needed to have something for myself, because otherwise losing your profession and your work is such a part of your identity. Like that question, what do you do? Is such an early question when you meet new people.
Yeah.
So I tried a bunch of things, and writing was what I settled on, that just kind of met my needs really well. And then
Were you searching for certain characteristics? Was it like, I need to do something creative? I need to do something. What were you craving that led you there?
oh, it's a good question. I think I was just really open to trying anything, because like stepping away from OT for a while felt really dramatic. Like it felt pretty big. So I think it was more just and we'll try anything to see what fills this hole.
Yeah.
So I registered for a tap dancing class with some moms I met at the school. And
Huh?
this was when like Pinterest was like the biggest thing ever. So I tried like baking and all this like cult of domesticity and knitting and all these things. And
Trying to embrace that I'm going to be home more. So let's make that meaningful, enjoyable, do something with that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
did some volunteering at the school, looking, to still be connected to other people in the community. And like nothing just really, well, like the tap dancing was a nightmare. Like I'm a danger to myself and others. Like, not good.
Do you know, as
Uh,
a sidebar, you met me with Lindsay Bristow. She and I were hanging out in the podcast conference exhibit hall together, and she and I do a dance class together.
oh,
Yeah.
cool.
But she is a much more skilled dancer than I. And similarly, I'm going to be swinging this way when we're supposed to be going that way.
That was so neat. And seriously, I'm going to fall on my face. These shoes are slippery.
Oh dear. That's awesome. I love that you did the tap dance. Okay, carry on.
And then a lot of the like craftiness or like the baking, it always comes with a picture. And it was such a source of frustration and failure to see what I'd made, and it never looked as good as the picture. And so this was not helping my mental health. This was not helping me like my life. This was just, it was, when you have that visual representation of what you're striving for and you can compare it to what you actually are output, and that's hard. Yeah. There were a lot of stuff that was just like a sweater that was like completely unwearable. And then the thing was like a lot of that stuff is super time consuming and expensive. Like you have to leave your house. And I've got these 3 little humans that I'm like also trying to keep alive. And so writing was great because I've always loved books. And I did generally choose OT jobs that required a fair bit of report writing. Like I did enjoy technical writing.
Who are you?
I don't know. So fiction writing was great because it wasn't at a specific time of the week, like the tap dancing class. I didn't have to go out and buy a bunch of yarn. There's no picture that I like compare this to. It starts with a nebulous idea and then that grows and grows. There's no kind of idea of what the finished product will look like for sure. other than that you hope it's good.
And were you actually aiming to be able to put something together that you could sell, or was it just writing for the sake of writing at that point?
I think just writing for the sake of writing. And the first creative writing I did was actually fan fiction,
Okay.
which is like a really fun sandbox to play in because if we're looking at it OT wise, like it's a really easily graded activity because you don't have to start from nothing. You're already starting with a world or characters and you pick the pieces that you want and then you take it off in a tangential direction or you add the new thing. And then a lot of it is short form. So you don't have to like have an idea for a novel.
Okay. So fan fiction is, let's say I'm a big Twilight fan and
Yeah.
I take one character off on a journey with a little short story, and that's fan
Yeah.
fiction?
Or
Okay.
Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or yeah.
Interesting.
Wrote a fan fiction, really enjoyed it. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna write my own idea now. I did, and I wrote a novel, and it was great because I could do it half an hour here, or at the playground. And the good thing about writing at that time in my life was it always waited. If I was available, it was there. If I wasn't available, it would just wait.
No deadlines, no demands. It's just there.
Yeah. It's not quite the same now, but I think the capacity of what I'm able to devote to it has grown and my ability to know what I'm doing has grown too.
So you were exploring writing, you ended up writing a novel, and then what did you do with that? Was that like, oh, that was satisfying. This feels like I've completed something. What was your urge after that?
Then I Googled like how to publish a book, right? So there's a lot about like how to get an agent and writing queries. And so I did all of that. I had a few nibbles, but nothing concrete. And then I heard about this online contest that was happening at the time. They don't do it anymore, but Amazon had this thing. It was called the Amazon Breakthrough a Novel Awards. So you could submit your unpublished novel or self-published, and it was like a survivor style thing. And so if your query made it past the first round, then your first chapter would go. And so 5,000 manuscripts are submitted, and I made it to the top 50. And there was another finalist there. At this point, you could read the entire manuscript online. So I had taken a look at some of these other manuscripts, and only one of them was like one that I was like, wow, I want to read this the whole way through. And so I left a review saying how great it was. And I read it and was like, okay, well, you're definitely not going to win, Jaima. Like, this is going to win. And the author, her name's Regina Soroy, and she's now a friend of mine, wrote back. And so we started emailing, and sure enough, she actually won. So she got like a publishing contract with Penguin and her book published and everything. And it was great. And she got an agent and then it just kind of fizzled. And that happens to a lot of writers, actually. Like you hear about a lot of stories that they're all just upward trajectory. And it's not like that.
You could
So
easily be a one-hit wonder sort of thing.
yeah. Or you could sign with an agent and they aren't able to sell your book. And so then they let you go. And then you're either writing something new and querying again, or even at this point, I've submitted the last manuscript with my publisher that I'm contracted for. So I've sent them a proposal for my next book. They have the right of first refusal, but they might decide, no. So they might ask me to resubmit something else, or they might just be like, yeah, see if you can find another home for this elsewhere. So
Yeah.
that is how it goes.
There's a lot of rejection in this process.
A ton.
How do you keep going? That sounds really hard.
Madness? I don't know. But I think like one thing that like I kept writing was this is when Amazon KDP and self-publishing really became a thing. So you didn't necessarily have to go the gatekeeper way, right?
You
So
could just put anything out.
Yeah.
Anybody could put something up on Amazon KDP.
So I felt like my writing was competitive because I, gone to this level in this competition. I'd had some requests to see the manuscript, but no offers or representation. So I was like, okay, I can either keep trying to court an agent or I can just go directly to readers. So I self-published my first book. And it was really fun and it kept me writing. And this was when I started to be able to like have some money from my writing. So it wasn't necessarily just a hobby anymore. So it was fun. And I kept writing books, and I wouldn't have kept writing books if I hadn't been able to do that.
I ask why in that moment, if you couldn't have done it that way, why would you not have kept writing books?
Because I think I would have been ready to like have the reinforcement of a paycheck.
Yeah.
That's so reinforcing. And
yeah,
like I also didn't want to be like, yeah, my husband's name is Jeff. You just keep earning the money. Don't, I'm not going to help share that workload at all.
Just writing for fun over here. It's fine.
Yeah.
Spending a lot of time every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Because at this point, like writing novels over and over again, like if I'm putting this much time into it.
Yeah. Makes sense. That makes total sense. And I could just thinking through writing as a hobby versus writing for others to read and to make some money. I would imagine writing a whole novel to keep it on your shelf isn't so much something a hobbyist would do. Like that you want somebody to be able to read it. Or do people share full novels without trying to publish them?
I think people do because, like you can't learn to write a novel without writing some novels.
Right.
And I've never met another author who hasn't written novels that are never going to see the light of day. I definitely have those.
Right. Those are practice.
Yeah. But I think if you're going to keep doing it, you want someone to read it and you want someone to come and live in this imaginary place that you've created. At least I did.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like an important part of it. And I'm thinking about too, like the elements of that as an occupation, right? Where you're feeling that sense of sharing and reinforcement and like the drive to create so that others can enjoy. And there's a sense of achievement and accomplishment too in not just writing for others to enjoy, but also being recognized for, hey, this is pretty good. And there's some good stuff in that. Like I can totally appreciate that. And thinking also how you've said there's that shift too, where it was like, hey, writing was always there for you in the beginning, where you could come and go and there was less pressure. And it's different now that you're writing in a more sort of as a career occupation. There's a different pressure requirement. But I'm thinking too about I do pottery for enjoyment and I really love it. And at times I've been commissioned to do pieces and it takes all the joy out of it from me. Like it sucks. It's like a vacuum of joy for me with the pottery because it's now I have to make what somebody else wants. And there's a level of perfection that they're asking for that. And or even our pottery guild has a sale a couple times a year and a lot of people just make stuff for the sale. You'll see somebody making mugs and mugs and mugs or berry strainers, lots of those for the spring one or things like that. And I think, oh, I don't think I want to go to mass produce. Like maybe I would go and sell that I've made too many bowls this size and maybe do that. But I would tend to only want to sell the ones that didn't turn out so well because I like to give away the others. And thinking about my motivation for doing this enjoyable activity, that how it shifts and changes and has a different kind of reward that way. And these are important things to consider.
I think really are. And it totally does change it when you're writing on a deadline, when you're writing for a contract. Like in some ways it's hugely empowering that someone has the confidence in you that they want this product that you're going to make, whether that's a novel or a berry strainer or whatever. But again, then we're getting back, I think, into that area where there's the Pinterest picture.
Yes. That comparisonitis.
Yes.
Which is when you get good at something that can be a driver that maybe now you're the Pinterest picture in some things.
Maybe I actually never thought of that before, but
oh, you made it. It wasn't ever going to be your tap dancing or your baked goods.
No. Or my Nordic ski coaching. Or
I think there's so many interesting things on that avenue of self-publishing, which for listeners is surprisingly easy. There are clear instructions on exactly how to do this on the Amazon KDP website. So for anyone who's been interested in dabbling, I self-published my Activate Vitality Planner And mainly because it was the cheapest way to get it printed. I
Absolutely.
wanted it as a
It's
workbook.
so
Yeah.
cost effective.
Yes.
It gives you an ability, like the reach of it is phenomenal. Like it's truly revolutionary.
Yeah. You can make a workbook or a coloring book or I was thinking about making like a gardening planner or something to
Mm.
a journal for gardening and putting that out around Mother's Day or something. Or I know somebody who did one on astrology and she's an OT, but she wrote it under a pen name kind of thing.
Oh,
And
cool.
but
Yeah.
she's super interested in that. And
An Instagrammer, I know a bookstagrammer, she does like a reading journal every year that she publishes on KDP, which is amazing. So if you have creative things that would manifest in a book form, like
why not?
it's amazing.
Yeah.
PSA, be careful, don't get scammed.
Yes.
Do it yourself. Don't
Yes.
hire someone to do it for you because usually that's straying more into the vanity publishing territory. Because I published my second novel, like including cover design and everything, for $300, including like filing for the copyright.
Yeah.
You could probably do it for less now that you can like AI design a cover and there's Canva. Because again, you have to be careful, I think, about sinking more money into a project than you can realistically make back.
Yeah. Totally. I paid somebody about $600 to help me navigate the places I wasn't exactly sure, which made a big difference because I probably would have got stuck on some of those stages. Though in hindsight, I could have found those answers.
Yeah.
But $600 was manageable for me. And
Yeah.
I designed the cover myself.
And this was back in 2014. So
Yes, true. Yes. Yeah, for sure. So I think it's neat to think about those navigating toward that and then ending up with a publisher. But I also really want to highlight this little section where I meet so many women in this transition of shifting with caregiving and career roles, or that transition where perimenopause hormones or shifts in hormones bring us to this place of, holy cow, maybe I don't have to only take care of everybody else first, and I want to do something for me, or a shift in demands or a shift in jobs, or lots of this happened over the pandemic that prompted people to pause and have this sort of occupational disruption and hold up. Mom's going to go get a new hobby and
Yeah.
or do something interesting. And it is so beautifully empowering and vulnerable. And there's so much personal growth in this sense of, who am I and what do I want to do in this world or in the second half of my life?
Exactly. It's
So
such a
beautiful.
important, pressing question. Like all my same age peers are like, try new things or like just looking at things in different ways. And it is such a real important thing. And like addressing it is important. It's hard to be
There's-
happy if you don't.
It is. And sometimes it comes from a sense of actually just really not feeling happy and feeling this loss of vitality.
Yes.
And how do
absolutely.
I find that? Because I can't just pick up my old hobbies. Those
Yeah.
don't fit anymore. Or I need something different. Or I know myself differently now. Or maybe somebody's gone through a big life disruption. I've seen it called...
You've seen the meme, right? Of like you hit perimenopause and you get sorted into like marathon plants, sourdough, or I can't remember what it was.
Totally. Yeah.
You look like you got sorted into plants.
Yeah, there was a sourdough phase, and there's definitely some pottery, and you should see my time. There was also a fermenting phase and a current phase as well.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I've seen it called middlescence. So that sense of
awesome
adolescence in midlife, right?
Yeah.
Yep. It's real. It's real. It's an adult stage of development, if you think about it. And it's great to embrace. And I think it's so exciting that, yes, this has been a way. You still have your OT practice half time. You have your writing as a job half time. You're living life, doing fun things.
It is really fun. And I feel really lucky. And as far as the kind of later part of the journey of agenting and publishing, like, I do think, like, obviously you work on your craft and you work on your skill as you work at your desk performance. But there is so much luck involved, right? Like you have to write the right book for the right agent at the right time. and it has to land with an audience and the publisher. So I do feel really lucky.
Do you think
And
it's actually luck? Do you really?
yeah, so Regina, who won the contest, got the agent, got the publishing deal. They passed on her next book. She self-published again. Then she and I started co-writing STEMinist historical fictions and novels, and we founded a new representation together. So that was the first time I found a traditional agent. And that was on, they call it on sub. So like your agent submits it to publishing houses, and that can take a long time. I've heard so many writers who like, and this happened to us too, like an editor's interested and you'll have a great phone call conversation with them, but then they have to take it, the acquisitions editor has to take it to their like team, and they have to basically sell it. And it's like this group meeting where they decide what the publisher's going to buy that year. So someone else might have a better case and you might not get picked. So you thought you were in, but you're not in.
So there's these decisions are being made based on what sells, what trends, like the things that I would imagine there's a certain amount of needing to be pretty familiar with what's going on culturally in a moment, what's driving sales, where people are. That's what these publishers are making decisions on. But I suppose you're also in that same boat of going, okay, what should we write about? What are we interested in? But what might strike lucky in a skillful way with some awareness? Are you thinking through those things?
The process, like self-publishing, is so much quicker. And I think that's really changed writing because self-published authors are able to be so responsive to what's trending.
Yeah. You can even go in for other people to know too. Like you can go in and just change your copy out and the next one that gets bought. So you can even go change your ending of your book or change the cover of your book or change I don't think you can change the title, but there's a lot you can change about the book, and you just upload a new thing and the next person who orders gets that new version.
That new book. Yeah. It's wild. It's incredibly powerful. Whereas like traditionally publishing, like from the time that I'm contracted to write a book to when it's published, it's at least 2 years. So I have about a year to write it. And then they take a year to edit it with me and send it to the copy editors and sign the cover and come up with the marketing plan and send it out to book influencers and send out ARCs to bookshops and yada, yada.
Wow. Can you tell me that category, STEMinist?
STEMinist, yeah.
Can break a STEMinist, and there was more to it. Break it down for what that category.
So like capital STEM, so women in science, technology, engineering, medicine, like not necessarily the easiest path. I think we've come a long way, which is fantastic. And some of the stories of the pioneers, like the first women to do this, are like the ones that like pushed open those doors for the rest of us to follow. Like I am so inspired by those stories.
Yeah. And so it's STEMinist novels and crime fiction, right? Is the super interesting. I think that's a really juicy category. I would imagine too that like thinking about what's going on politically right now and some moves more in the US, but certainly here we are in Alberta. Things happening, moving toward more conservative values and women losing rights and things like that. I would imagine there's a lot of interest in this exploration of feminism through fiction.
I know. And it's just interesting to see, this is like a little bit of a political diversion, but changes in technology as it relates to women's health are often so much more policed than other innovations. Anesthesia comes out, they figure it out by accident, they just start using it for everything. But there's pushback specifically about the idea of using it for childbirth because of religious mores about this is supposed to be painful, God ordained it this way. And you see the same thing happen with the invention of oral contraceptives, like really strong resistance for at least a generation.
Yeah, like they came out in our parents' generation but wasn't easy to access.
Yeah. And we're not even like talking about like the real hot button things like Roe versus Wade or anything.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Really fascinating. Are you a big Margaret Atwood fan?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what's happening. Yeah.
What in The Handmaid's Tale is going on?
Exactly. Yeah, it's scary times.
It is.
And even the book that I have coming out next year as a crime novel is set in Canmore, and the kind of reluctant sleuth, the compelled to become a sleuth to find the truth so his family member isn't arrested instead. He's a former mountain climber who's been discharged as a polio patient because it's set in the 50s after Alberta's biggest polio epidemics. A lot of that is he's a wheelchair user now. Like his life has changed, like how grappling with that and trying to stop his sister from going to jail. But then seeing this stepping back from decades of positive advocacy about accessibility and DEI and
That sounds really interesting.
it was just so interesting to me with the tragic plane crash that was blamed on workplace accommodations made for some air traffic controllers. That's so ludicrous.
So ludicrous. Yeah. I totally agree with you. Okay, this is really cool. I love that it's set in Canmore too. So we're both here in Alberta. You're in Edmonton. I'm in Calgary. And Canmore is where I retreat to, certainly. Head west when I need a break from life in the city. And yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about all this. Now, you had shared with me too that you have used your OT skills to create accommodations for yourself, essentially, like in keeping going, because the unstructured nature of writing can be really daunting. People talk about writer's block, but it's when you break it down in terms of executive function and the task of approaching this giant daunting task where you're also going to get a lot of rejection. Tell me how you have OT'd yourself in the process.
Well, I feel like writing is like all executive functioning, right? Like it's task initiation, it's goal-directed persistence. It's, I think, some metacognition to break down, like thinking about thinking, like, am I thinking positively about my novel and my project and my abilities to be able to do this?
And you're managing different parts of it at the same time. You're needing to hold in your working memory these different elements all together. And you're not necessarily just writing from start to finish in one line. You're needing to loop back and move things together. And has this happened yet? And how is this evolving? Did I take that out? I can't remember.
And in some ways, I'm not a super linear thinker. And my working memory is appalling. Like I can remember weird historical facts about the development of anesthesia and body snatchers in Edinburgh in the 1820s. But I need so much help with my schedule. Like it is embarrassing. I've never been like diagnosed or anything, but I know there's a few things that are just a little different
Really?
up there. And I know you've talked some about being neurodiverse yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I absolutely have to OT myself to be able to get stuff done and to finish a project.
So what do you do? What are some of your best favorite tips that listeners might benefit from? Maybe OTs who have private practices or have creative careers like yours or are doing unique things and need to manage competing deadlines and timelines and get down to business. Or tell us your tricks.
I really pay attention to my sensory needs when I'm creating and have a bit of a ritual. So a specific time of day, like I have my Diet Coke. That's like my treat. I light a candle. I have a playlist for each project that I'm working on. I usually put on like my comfies, including slippers. So I definitely pay attention to what's happening in my sensory environment because that makes it easier for me to focus and to want to be in the writing space. Because again, now that I'm writing like for a deadline for contract, you are getting into that space where it's like the Pinterest picture or like I have to do it. And that does, like we talk about with the pottery.
Yeah.
sometimes make it harder to tap into that joy and that playfulness.
Creative flow sort of thing. Yes.
Mhm.
I do that, the sensory stuff with billing and reporting. So I've always had Mondays as my admin day. And so it's my only non-client facing day. I'll have a couple meetings like this or record a podcast or something. But generally it's, especially when I was just in my private practice and I wasn't doing all this other online stuff, it was a day where I didn't have to, I could stay maybe in my pajamas or wear a comfy sweater or in slippers and a candle and a nice tea and like really set the tone of I get to be here and be cozy. Like, how lucky am I? Even though I'm doing actually the thing I hate the most in my business. Like,
Yes.
I'm not one who enjoys writing reports, but it was a good way to treat myself and offset the yuck with some nurturing, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a big, probably behaviorist element. Like as a new grad, I think I came out of OT school with like not that impressed with behaviorist things. I don't know why I picked that up. Maybe that was like
it's too
I don't know how I
one-dimensional, right?
it's too one-dimensional. It doesn't consider the whole person. But then when my daughter had her stutter, she did lid comb treatment. And I was like, holy crap. Like she went from having like facial and upper extremity tics, a complete stoppage of speech to you would never know.
Wow. Amazing.
So I was like, wow, it's something I've adopted in my OT practice and myself. Word targets, setting a timer, like I can endure anything for 30 minutes.
Even childbirth.
Yeah.
If it was only going to be 30 minutes, I'd totally do it again.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
There's the whole raising a kid after thing. But
I had this nightmare about 2 weeks ago that I was pregnant and I woke up like in a total cold sweat and I was like,
oh my goodness. That is hilarious. So you're setting yourself some concrete targets to help yourself. Okay, I've got to do 1,000 words or this many hours or reach this milestone. So you have a little something to strive toward.
yeah. And then like page count targets. The writing software I use is really good for that because it'll break down where you want to be by which goal, how many words you have to get that day. And it'll give you a little pop-up notification like, you just met your goal.
I love that. I find like there's a part of me that tends to resist the rigidity of a number, therefore don't love SMART goals, but appreciate. I was at the gym yesterday. I signed up for Orange Theory Fitness about a month and a half ago, and I recognized how many times I would have definitely not gone as far on my own.
Oh, right.
Yeah. If there wasn't a structure and someone telling me what to do and trying to strive a little bit more toward a little bit, like I should have spent a little more time in the orange zone. I had a really good green day. I'm good with that. I worked hard. I sweat. Legs felt weak. Like I definitely wouldn't have pushed myself that hard had I just gone to the gym by myself. And I thought, okay, I need to embrace that sense of in an hour, I made a good use of that hour toward improving my health and fitness. And there were some targets in there, and I'd like to embrace that a little bit.
It's tough with targets, right? Because sometimes they're so helpful and then sometimes they're so demotivating.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do have to step away from the target. Most of the time they're helpful for keeping me accountable. But like some days it's just, be nice to yourself, JML.
Yep. It wasn't a however many pages kind of day. That's just not how it worked today. Yeah. Self-compassion. It's important.
And it really is. It absolutely is.
I think where I developed that distaste for the numbers is having a lot of shame-prone clients over the years. And so having set a target, and if they didn't meet themselves, they would feel much worse about themselves than if we hadn't set a goal at all and they just went about their lives. And so there have been some times where I try to really embrace with my clients, like, if we set a goal for a 30-minute walk and you went to a yoga class instead, you check. That's to me, doesn't matter to me which exercise it was. Like, it was good that you got moving and you got out around some people. And so I try to set goals up like that, but also recognize that, sometimes that number is motivating, but not to hold it rigidly. And self-compassion.
That shame connection that you mentioned, I think is so important. And when you say that, it makes me think, and I hadn't realized this before you started talking, but in so many ways, oops, sorry. That's, kids.
Totally fine.
I'm on do not disturb, but they always come through. Anyways, okay, restarting.
Yeah.
Because writing started as like a hobby, and again, it was like there's no picture, there's no aiming. For me, writing is like a unique area of my life where it's totally separate from anything shame. Like I just can't imagine anything that I would feel shame about writing, because like even if I wrote a not okay book, like I still wrote it down.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
Whereas things about our bodies and body image and wanting to make positive personal change, like that is so much more connected to our feelings of intrinsic worth. And it's easier to tie that up with shame.
I think it depends on the person. Like I love the healthy attitude you have about writing. And there was one year, I think it was toward the end of we're becoming a little less lockdown in COVID. 3 of my psychologist friends told me they wanted to write a book.
Mm,
And I adored them, and they're brilliant, and they have so much cool stuff to share with the world, and each through basically talking through a personal meets professional experience. And I noticed in talking to a couple of them, it was like hard to initiate. There wasn't, like,
mm,
I don't think they started, and just felt really paralyzed by the initiation of the task. And in the end, kind of came to the conclusion that wasn't for them for one reason or the other. But I remember how deeply, was it perfectionism? Was it vulnerability? Was it how do I navigate this as a professional and sharing a personal experience? Like all
yeah.
of those things. But it was deep, so deep that there wasn't ever a start.
Yeah.
And oh, okay, that's really paralyzing.
Yeah. And I definitely OT myself there, right? Because chunking, right? Like I don't have to, when you start a project, who knows if it'll go somewhere? You might even finish that whole book and it might never see the light of day, right? So it doesn't matter. Like anything you do is just exploring. And I think coming at writing or anything like a big project like that, where you do feel such a big personal investment, and approaching it playfully just it lowers the stakes so much. And I think lowering the stakes makes those first steps okay, no matter what you produce out of them.
Yes. That is, you and I have both done return to work type OT, right? And I do that with my goals all the time with people, right? Like kind of setting those initial goals to be like a quick win, right? So that we can create a bit of momentum, make the stakes lower. Like how I've been trying to do this for so long, it's this big. Okay, why don't we start with this little bit of it, right? That's not enough. Sure it is. Let's see. And how do we choose that little thing in a way that it's going to feel really rewarding, but have low effort? And
It's true.
yeah.
And actually, with writing in particular, there's an easy cheat, right? I actually love writing the beginning of scenes and the beginning of books. I don't know. It's weird. I
Okay.
do love that part. It's like the middle that like kills me. But like with writing, you don't have to start at the beginning. You can start anywhere you want.
Yeah.
So don't write the first chapter of your book. Write the scene that you see in your head now.
The exciting part, the thing that like,
Yeah.
the whole
Or
thing.
write the life experience for your memoir or your professional book that is inspiring you right now. Don't worry about structuring it with a competent introduction. You just write what's coming right now.
Right. And that can create the anchor to which you then go, okay, now we backtrack and need to set the stage for this. And now we can see where, oh, we can lead here, where that can go after. That's really cool.
Yeah. You don't really get to do that with a fitness goal. You have to actually drive yourself to the gym. But like with writing, it does lend itself well to a cheat there.
Really smart. Any other OT hacks for keeping yourself going?
Oh. Rewards,
Rewards.
play, and then apps. I use apps to track my time just to make sure like I'm putting enough time writing in a week. I'm putting enough time scheduling my OT, client appointments and charting and stuff. But then also once I hit my target, I stop working. So sometimes I'll be in the middle of the scene and it'll be like, I just don't want to keep going anymore. I'm just going to stop. But being firm with myself about that. Now it's the time to do other things, look after my body or read a book or go out for coffee with a friend.
You could keep going, but that's the kind of going to set you up for burnout. I have in my digital calendar a lot of stops or block, like lunch and move or lunch and move outdoors or something like that. And I've made those all purple. Although after a while they start to become background, change it up or add
That makes a
different
difference,
colors.
doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah. Because it is, I find I end up my most effective and creative working time is in the early part of the day before others are up.
Yeah,
And
me too.
nobody really wants anything from me. I don't have to do any of those sort of external meeting goals. I could just really get in the groove, into flow on something. But then I tend to keep working at the end of the day because nobody's home yet. And it's not like it's who stops at just 2 o'clock or something. Like I forget to give myself credit for those hours because they don't look entirely worky always.
No, they don't.
It can be puttering with my plants and meditating and listening to an audiobook. But that is definitely deep work. And
It is.
I shouldn't keep working till 4:30.
No, because that's like when you have to disengage and your people need you.
Yeah.
Or else you need to be taking care of yourself and
Before they get home.
your home so that
Yes.
the groceries are bought and the food is cooked and people have clean underwear.
Totally.
And I think that is one of the dangers that makes writing maybe a less ideal choice for me in some ways, is that my little quirk is that I really hyper focus, or like one of the quirks. That's not like, who are we kidding? There's way more than one. But I will work through the smoke detector going off. Like I will work through my registration. It's totally wonky, right? So my family, unless they come up and tap me on the shoulder, I won't hear them. Like they just don't exist. I'm back in 1828 on a rainy street in Edinburgh. I am not even here.
I love that. Or your website. I love the 4 words: moody, wordy, bookish, nerdy. That is
Thanks.
so powerful. So powerful. How did you come to that?
Well, this is like bad. I knew that I wanted nerdy in there. I knew I wanted wordy in there. So I asked AI to give me some other words that would go with it.
Smart. Now, with the specimen, I have gotten to the part about where we discover probably why it's called the specimen. It's not even clear in this moment to me, but I have an idea. There's some foreshadowing happening there. But can you tell readers, our listeners, about this book in particular, why they might be interested in it?
It's about a mom who her son goes missing. They presume he's kidnapped. He's never found. And then as time passes and she's viewing an exhibition of medical specimens and she sees a heart, a juvenile heart that has the same deformity that her son was diagnosed with. And it was going to kill him eventually, but she was going to have him for longer than she did. And so she has to find out what happened and what went wrong.
And it's set in Scotland in what era?
1828, which is right when the Burke and Hare murders happened. We talked about them briefly in one of my medical ethics classes way back at the dawn of time. And then I came across the case again, researching some of our STEMinist novels. But these were because of the demand for bodies for anatomical study in early 1800s Edinburgh. It was a really lucrative trade. Body snatching was a huge thing. People were really up in arms about, torn between the necessity of advancing science and the ethics of taking bodies. And because of the shortage and the financial incentives, William Burke and William Hare murdered over 10 months, 16 or 18 people that are known of, and sold them all to one doctor.
To advance science.
Yeah. And they were really preying on vulnerable people, immigrants, people with intellectual disabilities, a sex worker. I mean, the crazy thing is that Dr. Robert Knox, who was their purchaser, his assistants recognized the body of the sex worker and they purposely kept it back until her relatives had stopped searching for her.
Interesting. That is so interesting. as I was listening, I was doing the dishes this morning, listening to the audio, which you have a woman with a great voice
She's
and a great
fantastic.
accent.
She's an incredible performer.
So good. And because she speaks, is it a Scottish accent? Yeah, it gives that authenticity to the setting. But I was thinking about when we studied anatomy in university, not that you and I went at the same time, but like I dissected. We had a cadaver that we shared with some other students, and it was treated in a respectful way. And I remember the impact of going to a ceremony at the end to thank the families and thank the people who had chosen to donate their bodies so that we could learn. And I get a little bit choked up even remembering it because it's such a impactful thing. And I so appreciate the respect with which they handled that so that we could honor the importance of this donation. And there's also so much consent in that. And so I was thinking about that in contrast to this.
Yeah, consent informs our practice and is such a pressing issue in society today.
So where can people find it? Where can people learn more about you? How do you want people to reach out to you?
My website is just my name, jaimafixsen.com, and I'm on Instagram. It's where I'm mostly for socials, and my book is most places that books are sold. So Indigo, your local indie, probably has it, but if they don't, they will order it in for you.
Does that help does that help you if people are requesting your book at stores that don't have it?
Yeah. And patronizing your local indie just does great things for your community too. Like a bookstore gives so much vitality to a neighborhood. It is a big part of community building. So I do like to point people to their local brick and mortar if that's how they like to read. But again, it's also on audio on all the platforms. Although if I can put a plug for audio listening, a lot of people will have their Audible subscription, which is a great way to get books. But there is a company called Libro FM that has almost as big of a catalog as Audible, and it's a social purpose company. And so if you subscribe to Libro FM, you get the same catalog, the same benefits, like you can return your audiobook if you don't like it, as you do with Audible, but a portion of each purchase goes to support a local bookstore that you designate.
No way. That's awesome.
It is really awesome because how many times do you browse through a bookstore and you're like, oh, I'd like that, but I'm too busy to read. I'm going to listen to it while I drive. Sure. So you're using the bookstore as part of your consumer experience, but they're not getting any of the profits, and it's just hard for them to stay in business that way. But if you get your books through Libro FM, you're not only supporting a social purpose corporation, you're supporting your local community. And Jeff Bezos has a lot of money.
He does. I would like to switch. That's really exciting because something I tend to do with my ADHD is I will order the audio book, or if I picked up the print book, but often I'll start with the audio book and then go, ooh, I'd like to have this one as a reference or something like that.
I pivot between the two all the time when I read.
Yeah. And then if I want to, I'll order the physical book starting with the audio and then highlight as I go, and it keeps the momentum. Now I want to switch that to Libro FM. I'll put links in the show notes for people.
Oh, sweet. Thanks. Yeah, they're fantastic. And yeah, I've been super happy. Great customer service as a customer of Libro.
Thank you for that tip. Can I ask you the last questions that I always ask people at the end?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I'm excited.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to share before I ask those things?
No, you've been so generous letting me just...
This is what we do in the lunchroom. I feel like I need to rename the podcast.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, cool. What does being brave mean to you?
Try taking a stab at it every day, right? I might not write anything brilliant today, but I will try. I will give it my darndest. And I may not achieve or help my clients achieve the success they want today, but we'll definitely try.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a persistence in that, even when you're not feeling it. Yeah. We don't have to wait for perfect conditions.
No.
And in fact, we'll never get started if we do.
It's true. That is a thing that writing teaches you, because your beautiful book will come in a box and you'll unpack it and you'll be so excited and you'll be like, ulterior because this moment has come, and then you open it and there's a typo on page 3. It just that's the way it is.
Totally. The benefit of KDP if you go that way.
That is true.
Yeah. I'll just go in and fix that right now. What is something brave you've done recently?
I set a boundary with someone that I felt a high degree of anxiety about, but it was okay. And I was met with respect.
I love that. The boundary setting is scary when we've been socialized to be human givers.
It is.
And even if it wasn't well met, it may have still been the right thing to do.
Yeah. I felt good about it going into it and better coming out of it.
Good. That's a good one. How would you like to see OTs get a little bit more brave?
I think just recognizing that like we're actually really good at this. Like we don't need to apologize or explain or validate. Like we're good at this. I think writers feel that way too. If you introduce yourself as a writer, like it's way safer for me to actually introduce myself as an OT. Because if you're a writer, people think you're mentally ill or unemployed, which can be both, but
a job title you can claim if you're not productive.
Yeah. There's a lot of imposter syndrome among writers.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to get over. And I think OTs, there's something so special and unique about our mindset and the way we approach problem solving. I don't think we have to apologize. I don't think we have to explain. We can just be proud of what we do and the benefit that we help people accomplish in their lives.
I think there's a tone of defensive OT promotion out there that feeling misunderstood.
Kind of apologetic. Like skills for the job.
Yes. Yeah. Owning it instead.
Yeah.
Confidently going, yeah, that's OT. Here it is. Boom. I don't have to explain the whole big picture of how that fits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we are most effective in advocating for ourselves if we just do it, just show it.
Yeah.
And the more people see OT doing awesome stuff, then they'll just appreciate it, even if they don't understand it. Yeah. I so appreciate you being here today. And
thanks, Carlin. It's been such a treat to come into the lunchroom.
Yes. And if you are ever in Calgary, we could have a real lunch, or you could come into my lunchroom.
Yeah.
My stinky dog's in the lunchroom, and usually the dishes aren't done.
Yeah, I feel right at home.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that Jaima was here today for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And now I really do think we should contemplate whether or not we rename the podcast the Lunchroom Conversations, especially because a lot of us practice owners or private practitioners do have that sense of loneliness in our practices. And it's one of the things I get the most feedback on about the Activate Vitality program. That's a group coaching program for therapy business owners. It includes a community where we come together and solve each other's problems and feel inspired and learn from each other. And we use a lot of ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy tools to support that flexibility in how we respond when uncertainty inevitably creeps in, when maybe perfectionism stops us in our tracks, or when we're really struggling to carry on or make the sense of that workflow in our work, in our work and in our business. So if you're interested in exploring more about the Activate Vitality program, I would love to hear from you. Please reach out. I'll put a spot in the show notes for you to connect with me about that program. And be sure to check out Jaima's book, Specimen. I really enjoy reading it. I can't wait to see what happens next now that we've discovered the specimen and understand where things go in this STEMinist fiction novel. Thank you, Jaima, for being on the show. And as always, be brave, OTs.